anxious to learn and then get home, right, to bed, so we can do that. Let's start with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we're thankful for how you have put us together. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. As we explore more about how our bodies work and how to bring healing, ask that you will guide us, guide our hearts and our minds, and help us put into practice that which is best for us. Thank you for the gift of your Spirit to guide us into all truth. We're grateful in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh, I should have started my computer back up. I see. Oh, we're here. We're good. Okay. Welcome back. Tonight we have the plant-centric principle and some other interesting topics to cover. By the end of the section, you should know something about caloric density and meal timing. This happens to be one of my soapboxes, so you'll get plenty of that. We're going to talk a little bit about micronutrients. Last time we talked about macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, fats, and I added fiber and water to those. So a little bit about the micronutrients, or vitamins, if you will. And we'll talk a little bit about vitamin B12 and what's called vitamin D. Then the plant-centric principle, and then a little bit about journaling, and trust that you'll find it helpful. So we always start with this little video, so there it is for you. Sally was in her early 50s and was 50 pounds heavier than she wanted to be. She was motivated and disciplined. She started exercising regularly and had adopted a whole food, plant-based eating pattern. The first 3 months went well, and the pounds started to melt away. She liked plant-based cooking, and her family was enjoying the new recipes. But when she stopped losing weight, she was frustrated. She tried exercising more, but the scale didn't budge. When she came to my office, she felt discouraged. "What's wrong? Why can't I get my weight down any further?" she asked. She admitted that she felt much healthier than before, and she had lots of energy. She was enjoying her new wardrobe, but she wanted to bring her weight down just a little more. What should she do? I explained to her a little about chronobiology, how time affects our physiology, and how understanding and applying these principles could help her towards her goal. I'll share these same principles with you later in this session. What are the benefits of eating a whole food, plant-based diet? There are many, and we will review some of them in this session. We will also review some important micronutrients and how you can get them with a plant-based lifestyle. Would you be happy to learn that you can eat more and weigh less? Well, through the magic of caloric density, that is absolutely possible. Caloric density refers to the number of calories in a specific amount of food. For example, foods on the low side of the caloric density scale are things like fruits and vegetables, unrefined carbohydrates like whole grains and legumes or beans. If you eat lots of these foods, you can fill your stomach and decrease your calories. These foods generally contain lots of fiber and water, which have no calories, so they help you feel full and keep you from getting hungry as quickly. You will want less. On the other hand, chips, candy bars, cookies, those are calorically dense or very high in calories. But they have much less nutritional value and leave you hungrier in the long run, so you'll be more likely to consume in excess. Let's talk about metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome refers to a group of conditions that include elevated blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, especially excess body fat around the waist. Research shows that in many cases, a whole food, plant-based diet and exercise can reverse these conditions without medication. That's exciting news. Do you eat grass? Most people say no with a rather quizzical look when I ask that question, but the cow eats grass and takes all the fiber out and concentrates the calories in its muscle and fat. And that leads us to principle number 3, the plant-centric principle. This means that the more plants you eat, the more energy, clarity, and health you'll enjoy. It seems that most people believe they have to eat meat or other animal products to get protein. But does a cow eat meat? No. A cow gets all the protein it needs from plants. The same can be said for the elephant or the giraffe. In actual fact, while beef and beans contain similar amounts of protein, beans have the added benefits of fiber, magnesium, potassium, and even antioxidants. Let's take a look at the plant power axis. On one end, we see animals, and on the other end, plants. As you plan your meals, try to incorporate as many whole plant foods as possible. To get healthier, you do not have to stop eating meat or other animal products altogether. Animal products are not essential for life or health. Just use them as a flavoring or condiment rather than your main course. Center your diet around whole plants and gain the benefit from the plethora of essential elements found in these foods that are so beneficial to our bodies. This choice will help you feel better, think more clearly, and enjoy more energy.
Let's talk about how to apply the plant-centric principle. In the grocery store, it means stocking up on produce and other plant foods so you have them on hand when you need them. In the kitchen, it probably means rethinking your meals. Most of us choose the meat we want to prepare and plan the rest of the meal around that. However, when you choose to either reduce or eliminate meat, it opens a whole new world of possibilities and flavors. For instance, instead of starting your day with fried potatoes, scrambled eggs, bacon, or sausage, try black bean breakfast burritos with veggies or overnight oats with fresh fruit. When you eat out, look for meals that are centered in plants, and if you want meat, ask for a small portion on the side. Many restaurants are happy to discuss your preferences and accommodate your wishes.
The body responds differently to calories in the morning and in the evening because we're generally more active during the day. Morning calories are more likely to be burned, whereas evening calories are more likely to be stored since people are less active at night, usually. Following the rule of breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper can help your body get healthier and maximize the benefits of a plant-based lifestyle. Remember Sally? That's how she did it. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and supper like a pauper. That was the key to her success. Wow. It's been a while since I sat in front of that camera. So it's kind of fun to see it again, and I never really like it, by the way, but it happens. So, have any of you ever had a plateau like Sally did? It can be kind of frustrating, and you've made all the changes that you think you should, and it's actually not abnormal physiologically. Our body does tend to fight rapid weight loss. We're made that way. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And there are ways to help kind of get around that. And sometimes it involves eating more food instead of less, which can be a surprise as well. So we'll look at that as time goes on. So what about this concept of eat more, weigh less? Does this sound like something you would like to embrace? In the little video, we heard about the caloric density. So how many calories in a particular food volume, if you will, it varies quite a bit. We often think of losing weight as needing us to have fewer calories. So we try to cut down on the calories. So what happens when we cut down on our calories? Well, we tend to get hungry, right? And then we get really hungry. And one of the things that it's almost impossible to do is to ignore hunger. Unless it's forced upon you, at least I find myself with a magnet towards the refrigerator or somewhere to get some calories, right? So getting hungry can actually backfire on you. So by not having calories and going hungry, it ends up driving a basic human need that it's really hard to actually win over. So we often try to diet, we think of it as a restriction. So you can actually do better by managing the caloric density. We'll talk a little more about that later on as well. So here's the basics from the nutritional standpoint. You have carbohydrates, which have about 4 calories per gram. So gram's not a very big amount, but what the body likes to burn it, it'll make about 4 calories. And for those of you who are purists, they're actually kilocalories. So I thought it might be a good idea to have a club for weight loss and call it Kill a Calorie, because as an idea. So carbohydrates about 4 calories per gram. Protein, we're often told that it's about 4 calories a gram as well, and that's what happens when you put it in a calorimeter. But because protein takes more energy to actually burn, it's closer to about 3.5. So it's a little bit less than 4. Fats, on the other hand, are 9 calories per gram. So that's over twice for the same kind of weight of food. Then there's this stuff called fiber. I introduced that to you. I think, didn't I mention that previously? Fiber, you put it in here and it comes out there. So it, in essence, doesn't turn into an appreciable amount of calories. There may be a few, because the bacteria in your gut can break them down and may make some of those calories available. Water, of course, always has 0, unless you happen to take it as a juice or a fluid that has calories in it. And of course, that can kind of fool you. So that's the density per gram. If we look at the foods, for example, we see this happening. Here's oil and fat. And this is a whole pound of food. I doubt there are many of us who would do a whole pound, but it gives you an idea of how many calories. So 4,000 calories for a pound of fat. Is there anybody who's ever eaten a pound of fat? There probably are. Aren't there hot dog swallowing contests, right? They probably get pretty close to that. I don't know. Nuts and seeds are about 2,800. So they tend to be a little more dense. They have some more fiber in them, and they, of course, have protein in them as well. Junk food, the chicken nuggets, potato chips, etc., are about 2,300. Refined carbohydrates, that's your bagels, your cakes, and those types of things. Cookies, so those are the refined ones. The fiber's been taken out of the flour, and then we use it to kind of make the food. Fatty protein, so beef, chicken, pork, fish, etc., around 1,000 calories per pound. Legumes and beans, about 600 per pound. Unrefined whole grain carbohydrates, so we're talking about oats, barley, rye, quinoa, millet, etc., about 500 calories per pound. A pound of oatmeal would be a lot, wouldn't it? I mean, for breakfast. So it tends to help us keep our calories down. Fruit, and this is an average, it varies, but let's say around 300. And then the vegetables, especially the above ground vegetables, like to divide them below ground are kind of the tubers, potatoes and turnips and those types of things. But the above ground vegetables like Broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, tomatoes, etc. tend to be around 100. Carrot is the one that kind of breaks the rule. It's much safer. Its glycemic index is up a little bit, so the sugar does go in fast, but the amount of sugar in it is very low. So it tends not to be a big problem. Yeah. So this is from my friend Jeff Novick, who's a very well-spoken nutritionist I enjoyed listening to. He worked quite a while with John McDougall. And he made this chart. So you can see on the far right-hand side, you have the oil. There's the 4,000 calories. And then the nuts and seeds. And he recommends, and I think this is an excellent recommendation, is to eat at the left end. Eat at the green end, right? And when you focus on those, you're decreasing the caloric density. Does it make sense to you? It's not that you never eat nuts. It's just that you probably should decrease them. I worked for quite a while at Lifestyle Center of America, and we were trying to help people lose weight. We recommended that they keep their nuts to about what fit in the palm of the hand a day. And they've got a lot of good omega-3s in them, and so you'd like to have some walnuts or pecans or something along with at least one of your meals. So that's a reasonable thing to do. But if you're really trying to kind of get those calories out, eat on that lower side. The vegetables, especially those above ground vegetables, tend to do best. As far as low calories, if you fill up with that, you eat a pound of broccoli, even a pound of potatoes would fill you up so much. It would be really hard to keep going, right? So, and the calories would be down. So caloric density is an important concept. And we move towards plants and away from animals because of that decrease in caloric density that we gain by moving towards plants. Any questions or comments on that? Important principle? Okay. We'll spend a little time talking about metabolic syndrome. So, metabolic syndrome is a name for a group of kind of diseases or disease states that tend to come together. This was back in the, I guess, kind of late 1980s that a fellow by the name of Gerald Reaven, who was a hypertensive researcher at Stanford University in California, came out. He actually received the award from the American Diabetes Association, the Banting Award, for his work demonstrating that diabetes, heart disease, hypertension, and obesity were all held together by high insulin levels. When I say diabetes, I mean type 2 diabetes. It's not true of type 1 necessarily, but type 2 diabetes. So high insulin level tends to be the common cause, and all of these things tend to happen together. Now, some people won't get all of them. Some people get 2, maybe 3. And many will have all 4. I kind of consider the diabetes type 2 to be the flagship because it's kind of where everybody's going if their body doesn't have the mechanism to kind of control it. So let's talk a little bit about that as we go here. If you're going to understand metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes for that matter, one needs to understand kind of normal first, and then we'll talk about pathology, okay? So normally, food goes into the stomach. From the stomach, it's absorbed into the bloodstream. Some of that blood goes to the pancreas, and the pancreas senses how much sugar is in that blood. And as a response to that sugar, it creates a hormone that I like to call the Paul Revere hormone. Now, you remember the story of Paul Revere. He went from Boston to Lexington. He wasn't fighting. He was taking a message, right? The redcoats are coming, or the regulars, or whatever the word was he used. So it's a messenger. It's not actually doing any work, but it's a messenger. Insulin is a messenger hormone. So it lets the body tissue know that the energy is coming. Now, here's a great example. Let's pretend that I am a marathon runner. I'm not a marathon runner, okay? So we're going to pretend. And I've signed up for the Disney Marathon. I have gotten myself ready. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. The gun is about ready to go off. I've been carbohydrate loading. I've been training for 2 to 3 months. I am ready to go. Bang, the gun goes off and I start running. Where's that energy coming from? Well, this is fairly early in the morning. I probably had at least a little bit of breakfast, but I don't want too much breakfast when I'm running because that can kind of mess up with your stomach, right? Not only that, but it slows absorption of water, and hydration is extremely important for exercise long term. So I'm running. The exercise is being fueled by carbohydrates that may be stored in the muscle. There aren't that many of them, but there are some there. We call it glycogen. And then it can burn some fat. But after a while, the first mile, the second mile, the third mile, fourth mile, I come to a table. And on that table is some Gatorade. Have you all heard of this stuff? So it's got water in it for hydration. It has salts in it to help replace the stuff that I'm sweating out. You can see some really low sodium levels in people if they don't do that. And it has some glucose in it to help with the energy. So I grab that bottle and I glug it. It goes down into my stomach. The glucose is absorbed. It goes to the pancreas. The pancreas releases the insulin, and the insulin goes to my muscles. The muscles in my thighs are doing the most work, right? They're propelling me along. When that insulin sends a message to my thigh muscles that the energy is coming, the response is dramatic. It's, yes, give it to me. Same race, same glucose, same insulin, and my eye blinker is just cleaning the windshield. If I'm reading, watching TV, running a race, my eye blinker is just cleaning the windshield. So with all of that, its response is, okay, I guess I'll take some. Now, what you've just learned is a physiologic principle that a lot of people miss completely. Energy management is at the cell level. Each cell decides how much energy it needs, and it adjusts a relative insulin sensitivity or a relative insulin resistance depending on its needs. Does it make sense? I gave this lecture to a bunch of fifth graders, and then I said, okay, I'm the patient, you're the doctor, right? How do we manage this? Can we turn it around? And they were quick to pick it up, and they became a doctor very quickly, let's put it that way. Effective, they could tell us what to do. Okay, now we're going to switch, and we're going to talk about diabetes itself. I'll try to explain it to you. So we're going to use a different illustration rather than a marathon. Now we're going to think about couch potato. What do you think of when you think of a couch potato? I see a recliner, a table with a lamp, a bowl of ice cream, gone. What was that? Well, that's coming, okay? There is a six-pack, no, 2 six-packs, and if I know the couch potatoes, somebody else brought that. There are crinkly bags, potato chips, Cheetos, I don't know. The strongest muscles are those to pop open the next bag or to pull the next tab off, okay? So now all that energy is going into the stomach, all that glucose is going in, it goes into the stomach, it goes to the small intestine, it's absorbed, that glucose goes to the pancreas, and the pancreas says, there's energy coming, and it starts yelling, if you will, there's energy coming. And what do you think the thigh muscles say? I don't need it. Maybe I could use a little bit. This goes on for time and time, multiple times, and over time, all the cells in the body, or almost all the cells in the body, are saying the same thing. No, I don't need it. I don't want it. In that case, we say that the whole body has insulin resistance. And how do you think the body responds to that? Well, first, it makes more insulin. But there's only so much insulin the body can make. And when it can't make enough insulin to make the glucose go away, then we start to see the glucose going up. Does that make sense to you? I like to put it this way. You don't catch type 2 diabetes, you earn it. Okay? A lot of people, I've heard of people who are afraid that they might catch diabetes from their friend who got diabetes. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but we doctors see some rather interesting things. Type 2 diabetes is something that you earn, not something that you catch. Now, my 5th graders, when I told them the story, I said, now, I'm the patient, you're the doctor, what did they tell me to do? Exercise, good, and decrease the amount of calories, in essence, of the glucose in. And it's really fairly simple. We now know that diabetes is reversible, although the American Diabetes Association in their kind of conferencing has decided they don't want to say reversal, they want to say remission. Because if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you got, right? So you may make your sugars go normal, but your physiology may not be completely normal yet. Because remember, what goes up first, the insulin or the glucose? The insulin goes up first. So you can still have high insulin levels. With time, as we live with this disease over time, the pancreas tends to get weaker and weaker, but early in the disease, it tends to be very high, okay? So there's ways to kind of figure out what's happening with those. So type 2 diabetes comes from too many calories in, not enough calories out. To reverse it, decrease the calories in, increase the calories out, and then the underlying process can turn around. Any questions or comments about that? Was that helpful? It is a normal physiologic response. Some people are more likely to get diabetes and to have this metabolic syndrome. In this country, we look at things like the cholesterol. Insulin is a problem because it drives cholesterol up. Insulin makes weight go up. I know that from watching patients. If they're trying to do lifestyle and just can't do it and I have to start insulin, I know they're going to gain 10 or 15 pounds when I start the insulin because insulin is a growth hormone, right? There's a very strong association between the insulin, as Dr. Reven pointed out, and hypertension. The exact mechanism, not 100% sure. Insulin does make the kidneys hang on to more sodium, so maybe there's, with water following that, more water in the pipes. And it increases, yeah. So there's an association, blood pressure tends to go up. And the cholesterol tends to go up. Insulin tends to drive LDL particles as well as the LDL particles as well as the cholesterol itself. Any questions about that? Got that pretty well covered? You've got it. Okay. What else did I put down here that I needed to pay attention to? The microvascular disease comes from the sugars themselves, and that's where they have the blindness, the kidney failure, and then the neuropathy. Neuropathy simply means the nerve is complaining. For some people, it's just numb. For some people, it's lancinating pain. For some people, it feels like cotton between the toes. For some people, it feels like they're walking on pebbles. I mean, these are the things that we hear. Sometimes it's a tingling sort of a thing, but that's a neuropathy. Actually, the most common cause of blindness in the country, our country, is diabetes. Kidney failure, same thing, and the neuropathy as well. It's something we would like to avoid. Okay, so you've been introduced to metabolic syndrome. You understand now that caloric density can make a significant difference. You can actually improve your numbers and your physiology by eating a diet that's much higher that has a lot more low caloric density foods. Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about vitamin B12 and vitamin D. These are two of the micronutrients that we'll pay some attention to today. Vitamin B12, how much do you need? Well, the RDA is about 2.4 micrograms per day. It's a very small amount. What whole food, plant-based foods actually contain B12? Anybody know? I heard mushrooms. It ends up that animals do not make B12. Plants do not make B12. Bacteria make B12. Isn't that interesting? So there have been some studies that said, well, they did find some garden vegetables had B12, but that's probably from the dirt and the bacteria hanging on the outside. So it's really not available. It's amazing how many people, as we get older, we tend to have B12 deficiency. It becomes much more frequent. People think that those who are on 100% plant-based diet are more likely to have B12 deficiency, and that's true. But there are many more people who are meat eaters who have B12 deficiency because B12 isn't absorbed that easily, especially from meat, because it has to be chewed apart. As we get older, what happens? Well, our teeth may not be working as well. Dentures don't chew as well as teeth that are functioning well. You have to break it up quite a bit to get all that, or get the B12 out. People are taking medications. Oh, this is fascinating. The B12 absorption, the B12 mixes or attaches to something called an R factor made in the salivary glands, and that takes the B12 through the stomach and then hands it over, hand off, like the football, to intrinsic factor, which is actually made in the stomach, which then takes a run for the end zone and is absorbed kind of at the end of the small intestine rather efficiently. So if you think about where B12 deficiency might come from, it might come from not eating very much. It could be because you're taking medication that's drying up your saliva. It could be because you can't chew your food as well. It may be because you're taking an acid blocker for your stomach. When you take an acid blocker for your stomach, then there's not as much of the intrinsic factor that's released. So I actually had a lot more patients who were meat eaters with B12 deficiency than those who were actually identified as vegans or vegetarians. Interesting, huh? So, do you think you should take a supplement? I promised you, I think last time we met, that we might talk a little bit about supplements. This is one of those that's very reasonable in my mind to recommend to people. There's another piece that comes into this that's important, and let me see if I can. Have you heard of MTHFR? Anybody heard that one? Okay, so a few people know about it. So it's methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, and it's an abnormal gene. It is the most common abnormal gene within the United States, in the population. The government has been checking that type of a thing. It's present in 1 out of 5 people when you look at the population. When you have that gene problem, you have a hard time making vitamin B12 the active form. So it needs to be able to be methylated. When you take, the most common B12 supplementation is called cyanocobalamin, but cyanocobalamin has to be changed to methylcobalamin to actually function. Methylcobalamin, or methyl B12, is the active form, and only about 20% in most people will get changed over to that form. If you have a genetic challenge on that area, you're one of those 1 in 5, probably a good idea for you to just take the methyl B12. So I've done a lot of genetic testing in patients, and I've found a number of people that have this. Sometimes people can't afford genetic testing, and the insurance doesn't want to pay for it. So it's become much more frequent for me, if I have any suspicion at all, to have them just take the methyl B12 as a supplement. And there's not really any significant toxicity from it. You can take 1,000 micrograms a day without any problems, although remember, the RDA is like 2.4 micrograms. So it's really, that's a huge amount, but it can help for replacing people. When your B12 is low, because it helps with methylation, methylation means adding a methyl group. That's helpful for detoxing things. It's helpful for activating brain hormones. It's helpful for activating and inactivating gene expression. So it ends up being very important. It's B12 deficiency can cause depression, for example, and And it goes on. Any questions about B12? Yes.
When should you take it? Because you said there might be some controversies about other medications you're taking that.
Well, the medications, obviously, if you're taking them, for example, the acid blockers, no matter when you take it, it's going to be blocking the acid in your stomach. So it doesn't matter really when you take the B12, it's going to get the same interference. You kind of have to stop the medication. Does that make sense?
But if you're not taking acid blockers, are there things you shouldn't take or should take with methylated?
No, not that I know of. I don't know of any problems with that. So I did have a patient once who I was practicing in the mountains of California. In the trailer at the bottom of the hill lived a family who were my patients. When you're doing rural medicine, you know, your patients are your neighbors. And you're treating friends a lot because you know people. Well, kids brought her in because Mama wasn't acting right, and it really looked like dementia. And so I started the dementia workup, and one of the things I ordered was a vitamin B12 level. And when the lab sent it back, they said unmeasurable, 0. Now, I'd been taught that when you have B12 deficiency, the changes are irreversible in your brain and body. I put her on big doses of injectables because that was kind of what the thing was at that time. We did that weekly for a couple of months and then monthly for a couple of years. And I was pleased to find that she actually returned to her normal self. And at least that's what her kids thought. Maybe they just got used to her again. I don't know. But it seemed like she got better. So, yes, we can replace it. And when we take large doses, all the mechanism we talked about with the R factor and the intrinsic factor no longer is of concern because with large doses, you can absorb it without that mechanism. Okay? So I would recommend anybody who's got gray hair to take it. I think it's one of the things we should be doing. Yes, ma'am?
Can you get enough from like a one-a-day vitamin?
Well, it depends on where you're starting, right? If you have diabetic neuropathy, it's thought that diabetic neuropathy is actually a local tissue B12 deficiency. Because B12 is also an antioxidant, like vitamin C, in the water system. So if there's inflammation and free radicals in the nerves for diabetic neuropathy, the B12 can be low in that nerve. So there's a test that the doctor can do to see if that is likely to be happening. That's called methylmalonic acid. We measure that in the blood, and if that goes up, that there's tissue, somewhere there in the body there's tissue with a low amount of B12. So, there's things that we can kind of do, and I think B12 is pretty important for us in the long run. I mean, dementia prevention. If you have diabetes, for certain, in my mind, you should be taking it just to help keep the neuropathy away. Okay. Well, did you learn anything? Ready to go on to vitamin D? Yes.
What was the form again that you were saying is best for you to take?
Methyl B12.
Methyl.
Methyl, M-E-T-H-Y-L. That's what you'll find if you go looking for it. And it's actually very easy to find now. So it's been harder in the past and more expensive. Oh, yes. Amazon has it. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. On nutritional yeast? It's got a lot of B vitamins in it. I don't remember whether yeast actually make the vitamin B12 or not. It's because I knew it was the bacteria. Oh, here's an interesting factoid. Vitamin B12 is the most complex vitamin we've got, right? It's got this little thing in the middle, and it's got this incredible 3D structure around it. And it was supposed to, of course, have evolved, according to the evolutionists, from some sort of need. Well, this incredibly complex vitamin, which is a very complex kind of building, bacteria have two completely separate ways of making the same thing. They have those things at the same time. To me, it's an argument for creation, right? Because those things don't happen by chance. It just doesn't make sense. Like, not just one watch came accident or by chance, but two watches came. I mean, it's complex, right? Yes, ma'am.
Can you
So the reason we put it under the tongue and dissolve it is so it mixes with more saliva. And remember, the R factor helps the absorption. With large doses, it doesn't matter so much, although it's probably best for you to at least chew it up to kind of release it. It'll get absorbed in the small intestine.
So it doesn't have to sit there and dissolve in your tongue. You can chew it up.
Yes. Yeah, that's fine. Won't hurt a thing. Okay, let's switch to vitamin D. Vitamin D is kind of interesting. The recommended daily allowance for the vitamin D is, depending on your age, 200, 400, or 600 of the micrograms. I'm sorry, nanograms for this one. We think that the blood level is kind of the more accurate one. Anything below 20 is called deficient, and anything less than 30 is called insufficient, so between 20 and 30. Ideally, it should be above 30 to be in the normal range. There are some doctors that want that vitamin D quite a bit higher. Now, it's not really a vitamin, it is a hormone. It acts like a hormone. We discovered it when this whole business of rickets was a problem. You may remember years ago we had kids moving into the city with the Industrial Revolution. They lived in tenements, narrow streets, they never saw the sun, and they began to develop this business with really soft bones. So the doctors were trying to figure out what was going on, where this disease was coming from, and there was a doctor that figured out that if he put them in front of an electrical arc in their underwear, he could solve their rickets, okay? So get that, that radiation, whatever it was. And of course, don't you just love technology? I mean, we come up with these things, we can take care of them. And then somebody discovered that you didn't have to pay for the electricity. You could actually just put them on the roof of the hospital, right? So, and from there we discovered, of course, they called it vitamin D because it came along after some of the other vitamins. But it really acts like a hormone. It does incredible things in the body. Not only does it make strong bones, which it's known for, but it's also a very strong immune modulator. The T regulator cells, for example, are stimulated. Their activity is increased with vitamin D. When Treg cells get low or confused, that's when we get autoimmune disease, type 1 diabetes, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroiditis. I mean, there's all these autoimmune diseases which can come. Vitamin D helps to protect against those. It's also the strongest terminal differentiator that we know of. Now, I love to watch people's faces when I say with energy, it's the strongest terminal generator, that we've got. So what happens is, when we start out in our mother's womb, we're one cell, we go to 2 to 4 and 8 and then 16, and somewhere along the line, one of those cells is going to be a heart, right? And it's going to divide until it gets to the appropriate heart size, and then it's going to stop growing, right? That's the terminal differentiation. So as the child grows, of course, that needs to adjust. So the heart will grow larger to adjust to that. Whatever part of the body was, or it is growing, obviously. So terminal differentiation is important. But it becomes even more important when we recognize that cancer is made of cells that have lost their terminal differentiation. And indeed, we have evidence to highly suggest that getting your vitamin D level up can help decrease your risk of cancer. Colon cancer, I think, was one of the first ones that came up on. Very strong association there. Do we have the whole thing nailed down yet? No. But there is a strong, certainly, observational data appearing that the vitamin D may very well be protective against some cancers. So it makes sense to kind of get it up. So,
If it's associated with frailty, low vitamin D is a very positive life expectancy.
she mentions frailty as we get older. Geriatrician, right? Yeah. Yeah. So you want the vitamin D level up. There's some evidence as well that it helps the muscles be a little stronger. So that can be very helpful. Now, where do you get your vitamin D? I know, it's a capsule, right? So, milk, they do add, one of the things they did to solve rickets was to put vitamin D in milk, but the cow doesn't put vitamin D in milk. And when they looked at the milk, took it off the shelf and checked for the vitamin D, there was a good percentage of the time that there was not nearly what it said on the label was in there. Oftentimes none, and sometimes more. That is, it wasn't very consistent because they're depending on a manufacturer to put it in. So vitamin D is best gotten from the sun. Sun hits your skin. The very same wavelength of sun, radiation, that would cause sunburn also makes vitamin D. So if you stay out of the sun in order to avoid skin cancer, you may actually increase your risk of vitamin D deficiency, even skin cancer. There's some studies, for example, that the more sun exposure there is, the better the cure rate is for melanoma, which is pretty interesting. So I say get out into the sun. How much do you actually make when you get into the sun? There's a physician in Boston, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he did a lot of the studies on this. So he used, quotes, healthy medical students, whatever that means. And they did some tests to try to find out how much vitamin D you could actually make in the sun. So he exposed them to the sun, all over, as much as they could. I imagine they left their bathing suits on or something. In the sun, they measured their vitamin D level before, and then they got them pink all over, and then measured them at the end. And you could make anywhere from 10 to 20,000 international units a day. So you could actually significantly increase just from being in the sun. So that can be beneficial. Now, the older we get, the less efficient we are at making vitamin D. The darker our skin, the harder time we have making vitamin D. Up to 20 times as much sun exposure, time-wise, to get the same amount in someone with really dark skin. So there's a lot of variables. I'm glad that the insurance companies are allowing more of the doctors to actually check these vitamin D levels. I think it's everyone who's got gray hair is at risk. If you work indoors, so you don't get outdoors, could be a problem, right? So I told you between 20 and 30 is insufficient. Below 20 is deficient. I mean, we're really worried about that one. We don't like that. I first heard about this from Dr. Hollick. I got his name. It came to me. Okay. I heard a great lecture by him kind of going over the science, and I said, I'm going to get mine checked. So I checked my level, and my level was 12. That was pretty low, yeah? You actually start to get the symptoms of hyperparathyroidism when you get down to around 8 or 9, because B12 deficiency will cause a secondary hyperparathyroidism. So I wanted to get my vitamin D level up. So the recommendation at that time was to take 50,000 of international units in this little capsule. It's not all that much. It's not like a huge pill. And to take that once a week. So that's what I did. I took it once a week for 6 weeks, and then I rechecked my level. And it went from 12 to 14. Now, at the time, I was working at Lifestyle Center of America. I was on a 100% plant-based diet with very low fat, probably in the range of 15 to 20%. And I actually called Dr. Hollick and talked to him about this. And I asked him if it mattered what you ate it with. And he says, it doesn't really matter. It'll join the fat and go in. It shouldn't be a problem at all. Well, I said, my level only went from 12 to 14. I had several of the employees that I'd also checked their levels on that had the same problem. And when they took the 50,000, it wasn't going up. So I told them, and I myself said, let's do this. Put a teaspoon of olive oil on your salad on the same meal that you take your vitamin D. And then our levels went up. Okay? So it needs the fat in the diet to actually go up. And if it's free fat, the free fat actually, of course, you'll get more of the cholesterol and the bile acids to help with that fat absorption. Interesting, huh? Yeah. So I think as we get older, vitamin D is one of those things that most all of us should take as well. Any other questions about, or any questions about vitamin D?
Can you take too much?
Can you take too much? Yes, you can. That happened to me once. I was working at the residency, and one of our new interns came in, and she ordered 50,000 international units a day for this patient. And I found that patient about 9 months later, had come to one of my diabetes classes. And we checked her level. It was up a ways, let's put it that way. And so we immediately stopped it. She actually had no untoward effects from that. So they say, and I have never seen this happen, but it starts to be a problem if it gets over about 125 nanograms per deciliter, 150. But it's not everybody, but that's when the problems tend to happen. There's a lot of doctors that will try to run, especially with dealing with autoimmune diseases and kind of gut inflammation, to try to drive the levels up between 50 and 100. And that's okay too. I'm more comfortable closer to 50. I don't like to run it all the way up. So. Yes?
Does it have to be full sun to get the benefit from the sun?
Anything that will cause sunburn will make vitamin D because it's the same wavelength.
So cloudy weather won't necessarily help it.
Well, you can get sunburned in cloudy weather, okay? Yeah. So it can happen. It's there. You just don't make as much of it, right? So they say you should spend, what was it, like 20 minutes in the sun every day. Even that assumes that you're getting some vitamin D in your, the RDAs assume you're getting some sun, and they're kind of assuming for each. Certainly if your skin is darker, you're going to need more time than that. And they say just your head and neck and your arms and wrists and kind of hands would be all you need. But the truth is, it probably isn't going to work for you unless you're very fair skinned and you've got red hair.
So in the wintertime, you're bundled up, still getting vitamin D?
Vitamin D is not made when the radiation doesn't hit your skin. So it's got to get through, so when you're bundled up. Even worse than that, I saw a lot of vitamin D deficiency in the summer in Florida because nobody would go out. It was too hot. They're indoors all the time. So have you heard of seasonal affective disorder? I mean, it's a little different as sort of it's vitamin D versus the kind of the serotonin business. But it's the same sort of a thing. I was seeing that in Florida as well because people are just not going outside. Yeah, when Dr. Hollick did the work on how much vitamin D do you actually make when you get out in the sun, he's exposed the medical students. And in my imagination, I see medical students on a spit on the roof of the hospital, kind of going round and around until they're pink. Okay, now take that one off and check their level. That's what my imagination does. I think there is a place for like a sun lamp, spending some time in front of those. But there's all that radiation business. You don't want to burn. You don't want to cause permanent damage. Vitamin D is protective. You need that. If nothing else, take the supplement. And it's vitamin D3 that's much more effective. It has at least been associated with improved longevity and better outcomes. Vitamin D3 is, for people who are vegans, they worry sometimes about vitamin D. Vitamin D2 is made from an algae or sometimes mushrooms, those types of things. Vitamin D3 is made from lanolin in this country. You know what lanolin is? Sheep sweat, yeah. So I tell my vegans, this is just sheep sweat, okay? Don't let it bother you. They irradiate it, they take the cholesterol, they make it into a vitamin D. And take it. Don't worry about it. Vegan is not a religion. We're looking for wisdom. It's going to be a D2 rather than a D3. They are? Well, then maybe they figured out a way to do it. Maybe that's the mushroom? I don't know. Truth is, I don't know on that one. They may be saying that, and I don't know exactly what they mean, so can't give you a good answer. Okay, I would say take vitamin D and take your B12. And for those of you who may be interested, we probably won't have time to do much about it. I also include magnesium as something that's worth supplementing because 80% of people over age 65 do not get the RDA of magnesium. What's that? Any of them is fine, yeah. The faster the magnesium is absorbed, the more likely you are to have diarrhea. So I usually recommend magnesium oxide, which is the slowest absorbed. That way I can adjust the dose up without side effects. So you can just kind of slowly increase it. Yeah. So let's see, B12, magnesium, vitamin D. I have recently added lithium because I have found that it doesn't even have an RDA, but lithium has now been associated in the mouse model with dementia. And when lithium levels go low, and their dementia goes up. And by adding lithium, they can actually improve their outcome. We don't have those in studies in humans yet, but it's very low dose. And the one that goes into the brain is lithium orotate, and in the realm of like 4 to 8, maybe 5 or 10 milligrams a day. Won't hurt anything, and there's apparently quite a few people are low in the lithium. When they study people who have died with dementia, their brains tend to be lower in lithium as well. So that's one I've added recently.
Plant source of lithium?
Well, it comes from the plants, but it comes from the soil. So if the soil doesn't have it, for example, we've seen epidemiologically that people who live where there's a lot more lithium in the soil, there's less dementia in those places. So I mean, that's part of the evidence that we have, that it may be making a difference. Okay.
What we have around here?
I don't know. I don't know. There must be a way to tell. The federal government, I've seen maps that do lithium around the country, but I don't remember them. But the soil testing, and they can find out, yeah. Okay, how is it when you try to change your eating plan? You've been learning facts that may be encouraging you to go in the right direction. When am I supposed to quit here? Remind me. 7:30? 7? 8? 8:30. Okay. So you're not chomping at the bit. I feel better. Okay. What should you consider before you start to make changes? These questions are on page 68 of your book. What are the challenges, and how can you make it easier to stick to a new plan? So, any thoughts on that? Any volunteers? Usually it's good to plan ahead. Okay, I'm going to do this. And you remind yourself. Do you put a card on your refrigerator?
Start slowly.
Start slowly. I like that. Mm-hmm. If you start slowly and kind of make those changes, a little bit at a time, don't kick yourself if you happen to slip up. Get back on the wagon. Kind of thinking failure is not a good way to go. Well, those are things to kind of think about, and some of you may have some experience with that. You can share with us later. So, let's talk about this chronobiology business. What really does your meal timing have to do with it? Does it matter when you eat? We're told a calorie is a calorie. You get this many calories a day, and you're going to have, this is going to be your poundage. You cut these down, and you're going to actually lose weight. The nutritionists still teach that, the doctors still teach that, but the science does not support it. A calorie is not a calorie. When you eat it, and a variety of other things make a significant difference. So, the first I ran across this was from a fellow by the name of Hallberg, who did some studies in the 1970s in the metabolic ward. Metabolic ward is where you go and everybody does the same thing at the same time, right? So he assigned them to 2,000 calories a day, and everybody got the same meal. They were randomly assigned to get this meal in the morning or in the evening. After 2 weeks, of course, they were weighed to see what happened with their weight and other measures. If they had been getting the evening 2,000, that was switched to the morning. If they'd been the morning, they were switched to the evening. So each became their own control. It helps strengthen the scientific kind of process evaluation when that is done. It ends up that people lost weight when they ate their 2,000 calories in the morning, but not in the evening. Well, that's not true. There were 2 people in the group that did lose, but not nearly as much as they did when they had the calories in the morning. And doesn't this kind of make sense? You heard it on the video. Breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, supper like a pauper. If you eat a bunch of calories when you go to bed at night, what is your body going to do with them but store them? Especially the fat calories, which go into storage without being looked at nearly as much. So when do you want to fill your tank? When I talk to patients, I use this illustration. If you're flying from Chattanooga to Paris, let's make it Atlanta. How's that? That's where the plane often goes, right? So from Atlanta to Paris, do you want them to put the fuel in the plane in Atlanta or in Paris? I mean, it's kind of got a gestalt to it, right? And certainly we will burn the fuel, much more likely to burn the fuel if we take it at the beginning of the day and fly through our day, because our body prefers to use those calories and to burn them. Storing them actually gets quite a bit harder to get them out. So it makes sense to have a larger meal in the morning and a smaller meal at night. Now, this can get even more interesting. That was the airplane idea. On page 69, you'll see the questions there. How many meals do you eat a day? Are you taking 2 meals a day, 3 meals a day, 4 meals a day, 5 meals a day? People with diabetes are often taught to take 6 meals a day. And that's foolishness. Unless you had the old insulins, and I suppose it makes sense, but with the new ones. And then there's the people that just eat 1 meal a day. It starts when they get up and it quits when they go to bed, right? So this is not necessarily a good idea either. So when do you have your largest meal? Is it in the morning, in the evening? With what you've learned, does it make more sense maybe to move it towards the earlier part of the day? Yes, it really does, especially if you're trying to manage your weight. Would you consider maybe eating a smaller meal in the evening? If not, why not? I mean, what kind of stands in the way? These are questions to ask yourself. They're obviously rhetorical and not meant for you to share with all of us. Do you really need 3 meals a day, I guess, is the question. We were kind of taught that was the case. Many people, when they try to decrease their evening meal or stop eating at night, tend to have a lot of hunger. Whenever you make a change, your intestines, your gut is very reactive, and it's very smart. We say the gut has the second brain. It has a memory as well. For example, if you eat at 5 o'clock, before 5 o'clock, or as you're coming to 5 o'clock the next day, your brain is saying, food is coming. It's interesting. Even the pancreas will start to make more insulin. And this phenomenon works even if the vagus nerve has been cut. The vagus nerve takes messages from the gut to the brain. So if that's been cut, the memory is still, interestingly, there. It takes about 2 weeks to develop kind of a new habit. So if you decide I'm going to skip the evening meal And we'll talk a little bit more about the reasons for doing that, especially for people with metabolic syndrome and diabetes. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to kind of teach your physiology something new. It, again, takes about 2 weeks. You're likely to get hungry. If you pour water on top of it, it'll kind of put the fire out, take care of the hydration part of hunger. Sometimes you may want to take something small. If you do that, make sure that it is very easily digested. Don't eat it just before you go to bed. I mean, that's one of the worst things you can do. But let's say an apple at 5:30 or 6, and then you go to bed at 10 or 11 o'clock in the evening. It's going to be out of your stomach, and it hopefully will have taken care of that hunger. Your body does adjust to it. It does take a little time. Anybody may have suffered with something called hypoglycemia, where the blood sugar drops too low. We understand that now most of the time, not always, but most of the time, is a pre-diabetes state. Remember I told you how when you're on your way to diabetes, the blood pressure may be sneaking up, the cholesterol sneaking up, the weight sneaking up, but blood sugars are still okay, the insulin level is going up. And when that insulin level starts to go up, it has the physiologic effects that we spoke to, and it will tend to drive the blood sugar down. And people with hypoglycemia, especially when they eat the standard American diet, which you know, coffee and donut, right? So the blood sugar goes shooting up, and then there's nothing to have it extend, so it'll then crash about 10 o'clock. And then people will need that donut or something to kind of hold them up. So they're kind of eating through the day trying to hold that blood sugar up. And generally what doctors tell patients is to take 6 meals a day to manage your hypoglycemia. Well, that just pushes you faster towards type 2 diabetes. It's too many calories. So the way to deal with it is actually eat high fiber foods, the ones with the fiber in them. We talked about this, right? They release the sugar much more slowly, and then beans are wonderful for this, okay? Remember, we're human beings. So if you have beans for breakfast, your blood sugar is not going to shoot up, and it'll be released over time. As a matter of fact, to have beans for breakfast, often when lunchtime comes, I'm not hungry. Well, it's much easier for me to control my appetite if I'm not hungry when I sit down. If I'm hungry and starved, I'm much more likely to overeat. Having that extra fiber holds it. So I don't eat as much. And if I can have some more beans and high fiber, actually it will last me all the way to bedtime and beyond. So one of the best things you can do is to keep that evening meal very small or eliminate it, and then make sure get the high fiber rather than trying to chase those low blood sugars. That makes sense? Any questions about that? Yes, ma'am. Nuts have quite a bit of fiber in them, yes. They have more calories, and because of the fat, they will empty out of your stomach more slowly. Remember, fat goes into storage rather than actually burning much easier than the sugars do. So, yes, nuts can work. And often they'll use a little bit of nut butter, for example, because that will release slowly. Your stomach empties at about 10 grams of fat per hour. So fatty food tends to stay in the stomach longer. And so the dietitians, the diabetes educators are often using fatty foods instead of fiber foods to try to get it to last a little bit longer. So the fiber tends to make more sense. So intermittent fasting is a term that you may have heard of before. Anybody recognize that? So intermittent fasting, sometimes called time-limited feeding. You eat for 6 hours, and then you have no calories for 18 hours. So that makes the full 24. What happens is your liver, wait a minute, I have to tell you a little bit more, because it has to do with diabetes, and some of you are very interested in this. When your muscles get insulin resistant, the insulin levels go up. Your sugars go up when your liver gets insulin resistant. The liver generally takes the sugar in and manages it for the body and takes care of the cholesterol and that type of stuff. The liver gets insulin resistant. It's not listening to the insulin, so it's not taking the glucose in. So the sugar is staying in the blood, number one. Number two, the liver is also stimulated to make glucagon, which tends to make the blood sugar go up. People with diabetes will tell me, they say, I don't understand. I didn't eat anything, and my blood sugar went up. The problem is liver insulin resistance. How do you reverse liver insulin resistance? Well, you could take metformin, which helps decrease it a little bit, but it's kind of a chemical telling your body what to do. The lifestyle way of managing it is to do this intermittent fasting. So 6 hours of eating, 18 hours without, and during that 18 hours, your liver is exercising. You can't take your liver out and make it do push-ups, right? It just doesn't work. But you exercise your liver by telling it to actually make the glucose and the energy that your body needs. So that's the best way we have of actually reversing the liver insulin resistance part of type 2 diabetes. Any questions about that? Yes? So you can eat for 6 hours, preferably just 2 meals, don't snack. Snacking is a little problem, okay? But thank you for clarifying that, because it doesn't seem like I was quite clear. So you get 2 meals within 6 hours, and then 18 hours with no calories, so it can actually empty. Thank you. I'm glad somebody was listening to me. I didn't.
Do you do that daily?
You can, yes. The same thing happens if you use... There are other kinds of intermittent fasting. For example, some people will fast 1 day a week where they will have either very low calories or no calories, only water during the day. But usually it's like 400 calories for the whole day. And that kind of thing can work. Some people will do it every other day. So they do very low calorie one day, like 400 or 600 calories a day, and then the next day they'll have regular eating. So that's another one that we also know works. Now, there's a fascinating one called the fasting mimicking diet. I see some heads nodding. They may have recognized that. This is absolutely amazing. And Dr. Longo from, the Sacramento area, UC Davis, I think, has done the work on rats and on humans. While he hasn't done dissection on humans to find out what happened, he learned that when they go into this fasting mimicking state, and that's about, I think it's 600 to 800 calories a day, 5 days, and it puts people into kind of a starvation mode, and the whole system tends to tighten like a spring. And then when you start eating again, it rebounds. And what happens is, have you heard of stem cells? Have you heard of pluripotential cells, which stem cells are? They can become kind of a bunch of things. They rebound. And so you see, for example, muscle being bigger than they were before. Rebuilding heart muscle. In mice, he hasn't done this in humans, he was able to take mice that had a destroyed pancreas, and by putting them through this fasting mimicking, rebuild their pancreas back to normal in 5 cycles, done once a month. Okay? So it's very exciting. I've had a few patients try it, and they generally don't like how it tastes. It takes quite a bit of, what do we call it, fortitude to actually go that low on calories. But they will, it's completely vegetarian, it's completely vegan, as a matter of fact, which is why my vegetarian patients like it too.
So what are they, 500 to 800 calories a day?
No animal protein, because it tends to stimulate insulin, and that ruins the fasting state. Low carbohydrates. It's mostly plant fats, small amounts. If you're a dietitian could actually do it. You can get on the website, their website. Prolon is the company that's actually making it, so you can purchase it and then do it for yourself. It's rather expensive, but if you figure how much it costs you to do your groceries, why, and the therapeutic effect is pretty amazing. So brain cells, the number of brain cells go up in the mice when they actually dissect them using this fasting mimicking diet. Very amazing how important fasting can be in our nutrition. Well, we probably should move on and see where we go from here.
So fasting means a lot of things. It's religious. Of course, there's the Muslims that do the Ramadan. There's a juice fast. There's starvation. I wonder why they call it fasting when time seems to go so slow. Right? It just doesn't make sense to me. So the insulin tends to go low, things get better. And that's actually what worked for Sally, was to cut out that evening meal. And it got a whole lot better for her. So it's not for everyone. It's not for people, much harder to do for people with type 1 diabetes. It can be done, but certainly only with medical supervision. If their insulin levels are right and they're followed along, this can be done in people with type 1 diabetes. But like I said, probably not a good idea to do it by yourself. People who are heavy doing physical labor during the day, and there's so few of those these days, that they would probably need that third meal. It'd still be better if they had it a little bit smaller, a little bit less in a meal. People with the prediabetes can do this, but they probably need to kind of just make that evening meal smaller and smaller and increase the fiber in their diets. Okay, there's this whole business of grazing or snacking where people just kind of eat all day. There is evidence that if you graze, you actually increase your calorie burn. So you burn more calories in the day if you kind of snack a bit all along. That worked really well in the metabolic ward where they do the testing, but when it goes into the real world, it's a little harder. When you're in the metabolic ward, say, okay, here's your carrots, and that's all you get. But when you're out in the real world, you're taking things or tempted to take things that are advertised. I bet you can't eat just one, right? So it's a little bit harder to do that. And my own understanding is this is not a good idea because by increasing the caloric burn, you're actually increasing the metabolic rate in the cells and increasing the aging process. Each individual cell in the body makes between 100,000 or a million. I mean, it goes way up high. I've seen numbers that seemed astronomical to me. Free radicals, and those cause damage to protein, to the DNA and RNA. We think that has something to do with the aging process. The best thing you can do to live longer is to actually have caloric restriction. And cutting out that evening meal is a very nice way to do that. Doesn't matter when you start, you get the benefit pretty much any age by doing that. Okay. So are you a snacker? That'd be nice if you could avoid doing that. Let's resist the urge. Takes about 2 weeks to change. Make sure you're hydrated. And I discovered my body is really smart. I usually don't eat suppers. I've been doing that my wife and I have been doing that for a number of years. But sometimes I'll get invited to someone's house for a social event on a Saturday night, for example. And they'll serve some popcorn and apples. And, it's a good memory from time past. And I'll say, okay, well, I'll have a little bit. The next night, at 7 o'clock, my stomach will say, are you going to feed me again? And that insulin will start to go. Your body tries to learn this. So just beware when you do that, that's going to happen. And you can make the decisions to make the changes. And then enjoy the benefits. During the nighttime, when you're sleeping, if you have an empty stomach, once your body has gotten used to the physiology, your gut makes a whole bunch of melatonin. A lot more than your brain does in the fasting state. So once you reach that state, it's easier to keep your weight under control, which is nice when you have that. For me, that was one of the major reasons I started doing 2 meals a day and skipping the evening, because weight was always a problem for me. I was the short, fat kid in school, and that's just, keeping that weight down is a challenge. So that's been very helpful. Often hear that people's acid reflux goes away. If you don't have anything in your stomach, stimulating acid, what's the stomach acid coming from? Well, so often we use this to help people get off of those little acid blocking pills by just decreasing that evening meal, taking a big glass of water to kind of neutralize. Okay, the plant-centric principle, you've learned some things. You've learned that animals tend to be low in fiber and highly concentrated calories. So it's not that you don't get to eat any at all. or you can't, or you'll be a sinner if you do. It means you should eat a lot of plants and use your animal products as condiments, as flavoring. When you are, I went a little too fast on that, didn't I? No? That's right. So move towards the plants. Does it make sense to you? Eat more plants. That's the message. It's Eat Plants, Feel Whole is the name of the program, and that's kind of the measure. Now, when we put all of these things together, this is what we see. Remember, we've been talking about choose something better so we can make a choice. We've been talking about the unprocessed, processed continuum. If we put those together, we get this, right? And the right upper quadrant is where you're aiming to be healthy. I don't have it on this slide deck, but there's another one that I add up in the far corner. It's smaller, and it's therapeutic. If you're trying to actually reverse disease and deal with a serious problem, then probably a good idea to actually go completely unprocessed, complete off of animal products. And that's where the science tells us we know that we can actually get reversal doing that better than about anywhere else. Questions or comments about that? Does it make sense to you? Yeah. So eat more plants. So how do we do this in the grocery store? Well, it's when you go around, as has been mentioned in the past, you go to the periphery of the grocery store. You buy the things that are as grown, not so processed. And then you put those in your pantry. If there's no Oreos, it's really hard to get them, right? So don't bring them home, and then that'll make it a whole lot easier. In the home kitchen, here's something for that slow move. Some people need to move quickly because they got really bad disease, but if you'd like to move slowly, here's one that I like to recommend. Once a month, find a new, healthier meal. Identify your normal meal. Most of us have about, right? And by the time you get to a year and a half, you've in essence changed your whole meal system to healthier. Does it make sense? I had actually a medically retired physician from Loma Linda who listened to me talk, and this has been 35 years ago, it's a long time ago. And they had 2 teenagers at home. And the doctor father and the mother said, "We're going to do this for you, Dad." So they went home, and there were the kids. Mom said, made a healthy plant-based meal for Dad. And then said to the kids, "Well, what do you want?" They wanted, macaroni and cheese. They wanted, whatever it was. So she fixed that for them. And about a week in, somebody says, one of the kids says, "Why are you making something different for Dad than you're making for us?" "Oh, it's for his health." So they started to try it. And they said, "Mom, you don't have to make it different for Dad and us. We're happy to eat what's good for him." It was their choice, right? So that transition was made rather easily, even with kids in the house, by making that change and not forcing it on people, right? So for what that's worth, a little word of encouragement. In the restaurant, I would say look for the bean dishes, best you can. Things with a lot of beans in them, we're human beings. Yeah, don't forget it. So, your personal journey, and this is on page 77. Are you satisfied with your habits? What do you want to change? And then encourage you to look at 3 things you can do this week to eat more healthfully at home, at work, or dining out, right? So there's a place, I think, 3 for each of those for you to write it down. And then continue on your own journey. So it's page 78 that runs at the end of this chapter, and there's where our review is. I'm going to turn over there myself. So vitamin B12, you need it. Recommend supplementing it really for anybody. Vitamin D for strong bones and strong immune system, so that's good. Oh, I just thought of another one. A Japanese study. They did kids, and they gave them either at flu season, they gave them either vitamin D, 1,100 micrograms, so it wasn't a huge dose, or a placebo. And they wanted to know what happened for flu for those kids. It significantly, about 50% decrease in flu for the kids that got the vitamin D rather than the placebo. That's pretty neat, isn't it? And then they weren't going to look at this, but they noticed that there were a lot fewer emergency room visits. And the kids with asthma had an 80% drop in their emergency room visits just by taking the vitamin D. That was pretty impressive. I mean, this vitamin D is good stuff, and you don't want too much of it, but if you stay within the reasonable range, Institute of Medicine says 4,000 international units a day should be the highest safe dose without a doctor's supervision. So they're looking at populations. The evidence grows. I think it should probably be a little higher than that. Let's see, what's next here? Eat more, weigh less. This is the caloric density. Look for foods that are lower in caloric density. Plants. Please eat as many plants as you can fit in. And you can hide them in a lot of different ways. But a lot of my patients have a hard time eating greens. They just don't like greens. So at our house, we've come up with green smoothies. They go something like this. Take a big tub of mixed greens, right? I'll stuff the whole thing down into the blender. I'll take a can of pineapple juice. Sometimes 2 of the small ones is what my wife likes to use. And you can add other things. I've tried, for example, a little bit of allspice, cinnamon, those types of things. Here's an interesting piece of information that I discovered from a food industry fella. When you have something that tastes bitter and you overcome that bitterness with some sweet, it is much more enjoyable. That's actually the trick for chocolate. Chocolate is bitter. When you add enough sweet to cover that, when you go to carob, they haven't figured it out. In order to make carob work, you have to add bitter, and then you'll get that same pleasure, which is kind of interesting, right? So greens tend to be just a little bit bitter. So please add enough sweetener to overcome that bitterness. Doesn't have to be really sweet, but a little bit in there. Better to take your greens. This is what I tell my patients, right? Take your greens, eat them this way. You find it enjoyable. It's actually quite tasty if it's slightly sweet. Interesting, huh? Yeah. I also like to put ice in it, and so it's cold. And to me, it tastes better cold than it does warm. My wife does it warm, so I like to get to it before she does. Okay. Yes, sir.
I spent one summer in Germany, and they would have, I watched them bring in some green, and go, oh man, finally, we're going to get some green, cooked green.
Yeah.
It was a parade, it looked just like that.
Yeah.
And they poured it over top of their sourdough.
Uh-huh.
Now this was a very concentrated
Yes,
sourdough.
yes.
But the grains, right, you could see it.
So this sourdough with this green, thick plant stuff that went on top. And what happened?
It's good.
Oh, he liked it. Okay. That was found in Germany. Well, that'll be interesting. I mean, you can experiment. Foreign countries are a good place to look for healthy alternatives because every country has some of those.
When you get hungry, everything tastes good.
Yeah, that's true. Camping, everything tastes better, right? Yeah, okay. So small steps are good. Make those changes one at a time. Keep them going. Meal timing can make a huge difference in your health, especially for those people with diabetes. May need doctor's help if you're actually on insulin. Give your digestive system a break in the evening. Keep it down low. I use my evening meal time for exercise. I go out and exercise, and the appetite tends to kind of go away. The liver starts to kick out the glucose, and it doesn't seem to be a problem. And then journaling is a very beneficial sort of thing, just to write down. We'll be talking a little bit more about that next time. There is a kind of a short form journal at the end of your book, and to help you kind of keep track of things and some journaling recommendations. We have a book that's called the Eat Plants Feel Whole Journal, And that journal has much more kind of space to write and actually write in with a weekly summary, etc. So journaling can be very beneficial in helping you understand what's going on in your life and in your bodies. Okay, any other questions before we wrap up? I've had a good time. I trust you have as well. Let's close with a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we're thankful for the truths that you've shared with us, for what we have learned this evening. Teach us how to put into practice what is best for us individually. Certainly you have promised to give each of us the wisdom we need to make the best choices to improve our health. And we're all a bit different, so thank you for guiding us on this pathway. Thank you for your blessing as we drive home, and give us good rest tonight. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Good night.